Greetings, everyone. It is Ryder, and today the Lord wanted me to come on and share a quick word with you. And the title of this message is The Value of Celibacy. The Value of Celibacy. So this isn't a prophetic word. This isn't concerning a dream or a vision or something to come that the Lord told me about. It was more, he just spoke to me last night and again this morning saying that he wanted me to come on today and teach about the value of celibacy, like the importance of it. So I know that the Lord just wants me to get right into this, and I pray that this reaches who it's meant to reach, with God's mighty hand. Now, I'll start off and say, I've been practicing celibacy since about April of 2022, so it's been a little over 2 years for me. As somebody with a past like mine, some of you know about if you watch some of my other videos, I never thought that I would be able to get out of the kind of lifestyle that I was in. I never thought that I'd be practicing celibacy like I am now, because I really struggled with sexual immorality and with lustful thoughts and all these fleshly sinful desires. But then after feeling this conviction in my spirit for a while, and after getting a strong warning from God, I felt like I was meant to practice celibacy for the rest of my life. I got the strong warning after I knew what I was supposed to do. I didn't listen, and after that, I've been celibate ever since, And I think that there's a lot of value in it. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, the Apostle Paul, he talks about married life, he talks about change in status, like circumcision versus uncircumcision, and being a slave versus free. And he also talks about, what to do if you're unmarried. And I think it makes sense to just read it. So this is from 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 32 to 38. So the Apostle Paul writes to the church at Corinth, "I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife, and his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way in undivided devotion to the Lord. If anyone is worried that he might not be acting honorably toward the virgin he is engaged to, and if his passions are too strong and he feels he ought to marry, he should do as he wants. He is not sinning. They should get married. But the man who has settled the matter in his own mind, who is under no compulsion but has control over his own will, and who has made up his mind not to marry the virgin, this man also does the right thing. So then, he who marries the virgin does right, but he who does not marry her does better. For this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God." And what Paul is talking about, I think it's pretty clear cut here. Paul talks about, the value of celibacy, and he himself was celibate. He never took a wife for himself or anything like that. And he never had any children of the flesh. He was a spiritual parent to many, he helped grow all the churches, and he considered some of his fellow workers like Timothy his own children. But in terms of biological children, no. But the thing though that he talked about is how if you're unmarried, if you're practicing celibacy, how your life is solely focused on pleasing the Lord, whereas if you're married, you're focused on what your husband or wife wants, and you're also focused on worldly things. It's well, how do I provide for my family? How do I provide for my children? But if somebody isn't married, they're focused solely on pleasing the Lord, or at least that's where they should be at, And I found that for me, instead of focusing on a relationship or anything else, I have more time to focus on the Lord, to focus on serving Him, to focus on my job, because I do community-based mental health work. So I work with those, that have mental health struggles. I can focus more on my work. I can focus more on my circus training. I can just focus more on other things, and I'm not focused about a relationship or anything like that. So I'm able to focus more on just like, you know, what God has called me to do and my job and also, you know, my hobbies. And the Apostle Paul, you know, also said, though, that, you know, like if somebody marries, they're not doing anything wrong. The only time that you do anything wrong is if you're having sex outside of marriage, regardless of the type of relationship it is, you know, and, you know, whether it's like, you know, a homosexual relationship, a heterosexual relationship, you know, sex outside of marriage is a sin. Sex outside of a marriage that is not for the sole purpose of procreation is a sin, and it is sexual immorality, you know. So if somebody, you know, like can't control, you know, their desires and their thoughts, it's better to get married and to, you know, like have like a husband or a wife and have children. It's better to do that, you know, so that you're not committing sexual immorality, so that you're not having sex outside of a marriage that isn't for the purpose of procreation. But also if somebody is able to like reign over these desires, like they're able to control their will, like the Apostle Paul said, it would be better to remain celibate so that you can focus solely on pleasing the Lord. You know, Paul said, so then he who marries the virgin does right, but he who does not marry her does better. It's better not to marry so that you can focus solely on serving the Lord, but it's not wrong to take a partner, you know. And I feel like in a lot of like, you know, Christian groups and churches and stuff, I hear a lot of people talk about, you know, the value of marriage, the value of the family, the value of all these things, you know, but I don't hear as much like people talk about the value of being single, the value of being celibate, the value of dedicating your life solely to the Lord and serving Him. You know, there's so many preachers and they talk about, you know, family and marriage and all this stuff, but what about somebody like me, you know, that's been called to be celibate for the remainder of my life, you know? And I know it's for my own good, it's for my own protection, but I also have the opportunity to do something like that was considered better, you know. So God took, you know, my past, like my ugly sinful past, and He called me to practice celibacy, and I get the opportunity to walk in such an amazing path and to focus solely on serving the Lord and what He's called me to do, which is such a blessing. And I think that there are other of you out there that you may have felt this call in your spirit. You're able, by the grace of God, by God living in you, to like reign over these like, you know, fleshly desires. You're able to control your passions, and you've been called to practice celibacy for the remainder of your life. And consider it a glory, consider it a blessing, consider it something that is like an amazing honor, you know. Because I remember when I first felt the call to practice celibacy, I'd look at other people and they're getting married or engaged or whatever, and I felt like I was missing out. But after like a little bit of time, like even just a few weeks or a few months, when I read that part in First Corinthians for the first time, I was like, and someone told me about that. I think it was someone at church told me about it, and then I read it. Like, I was just like, whoa, I've been called to something even better than having a family. Like, that's amazing. So there is so much beauty and value and so much like honor that God gives those who are called to practice celibacy, those who are called to remain single for the rest of their lives. You know, they get to live a life that is wholly devoted to the Lord. Their life, you know, is a sacrifice to the Lord. They're not focused on the things of this world. They get to focus solely on pleasing Him, and I think that that is beautiful and amazing. So if the Lord has called you to practice celibacy, do not feel discouraged. Do not feel like you're missing out on anything. You've been called to something even greater than what you could imagine. And I think if anything, you know, it's exciting. Consider it a joy, consider it an honor, consider it a blessing, consider it something to be excited about, you know. And I found like even for me, you know, like even though I'm not gonna like have children or anything like that, you know, like God has had me like disciple people, and when I work events and I get to make balloon animals for the kids, it still brings me joy, you know. So I still get to like, you know, enjoy discipling people. I get to enjoy helping people. I get to enjoy doing fun activities with kids regardless of whether or not I'm a parent. You know, with all that being said, I think it's time to wrap up this message. But for now, take care, stay safe, have a wonderful rest of the day, and know that Jesus loves you, and I love you too. Bye-bye.